Hello, my name is Kieran Dolan, and I've just cleaned up the garage after finishing that desk project. That was pretty fun. Now the garage is all clean, so it's time to dirty it up again. Christmas is in about 15 days, just over 2 weeks, and I've been playing chess with my dad recently. And I think I'm going to make him a chessboard because I think that'd be pretty dang fun to do. And we don't really have a nice chessboard. So, with that in mind, I was going to use some 2x4s and I wanted an end grain for the face of it because I thought that would look really cool as well. But when I was calculating it out, I just felt that the 1.5 inches after I stripped off even just a 1/16 on each side would be too thin, too small of a square for a chessboard. So I rummaged around in my wood pile, and I didn't really know that I had such honestly nice looking wood. But this is some good looking wood. It's very dense grained. I'm honestly not sure what type of wood it is. It looks soft. I honestly couldn't tell you. I've actually got a few of these pieces here, and I haven't measured it out, but it looks like it'll give me a 2-inch square. Let me put this away and we'll talk. So this wood is 2.5 by 3.5. And what I want to do is cut it down to 2-inch by 2-inch square and then chop it into 1/16 inch pieces, or maybe 1/8 inch pieces. And then I'll be able to stain this a dark color and a lighter color, and this grain will show at the top, and that'll be pretty nice looking, I think. And then I'll be able to layer these on, I was going to say this piece, or one of these 2 pieces of plywood, but actually I'm going to use a bigger piece because 2 inches times 8 is going to be 16 inches, and these are only 13 inches. So I'm going to get a bigger piece of plywood, which I have over there, and cut it down to 16 inches. So first things first, I'm going to start picking out my wood and making sure that I've got everything correct, and then cutting these bad boys down to size, 2-inch by 2-inch. Very good. Okay, please ignore my neighbor's leaf blower. They're blowing off their roof right now. But I think I can definitely see that these are 2 different types of wood, or at least they're 2 different bloody trees. Maybe that's obvious. But yeah, they definitely look different, the 2 grains. They smell different, which maybe that's just like baloney, but I feel like this is what Paul Sellers smells like. Hello, so quick update. Here's an update. I've got 36 of these. I think I've got 36, just about, and they look pretty good. They're all sorts of shapes and sizes. I went to Home Depot and got some, I think this is Douglas fir or spruce, a 4x4, excuse me. It's still a bit wet actually, so I'm going to take these up into the house tonight, but I'm going to surface 2 of these sides on each of these tonight. I've got the chop saw over here. I don't have a 0 clearance slot for the bottom, but I have a 0 clearance slot for the back, and so I'm using a 0 clearance slot for the back and chopping like this instead of like this. And that's going to give me that nice clean edge on the one side, and then I'm going to put that down and then get a 90-degree edge on the other side, and then I can use both of those to get the other 2 edges nice as well. So here's my 0 clearance slot. It's really nothing pretty. I just took a piece of plywood and chopped it up a bit. Then I'll be able to use a piece of 2x4 and this thingamajigger, you know, this clamp that goes on my saw, and get the correct size. It's coming along quite nicely, actually. I've got everything sort of figured out, I think. The one thing that I haven't really decided on is what I'm going to do for the sides. I could use, you know, this color on two sides and then this color on the other two sides, and I think that might be pretty cool. I think that might be what I'm going to do. Make it look pretty nice, I think. But anyways, that's for later, Kieran, to think about. Now I've cut the squares out. I don't have a planer or jointer or anything like that to make anything really square, but let me show you what I did use to sort of jerry-rig some square bits. I'll show you on my my miter saw. So over here is my miter saw, as you can see. I would cut, well, I mean, not like this, but on the other side, I'd cut a right angle to this thing here, and then I'd flip this down so that it was flat against this, cut another right angle here, okay, and then I've got two sides which are at a perpendicular, and then I'd put it over here into this jig, almost, which is set at the right size, and then cut down on this side, and that'd be 3, and then there we go, we'd cut down and that'd be 4, and that would give me a square that was 2 inches on each side. Now let me flip the camera to the other side and I'll show you the result. Honestly, it looks pretty good. Some of these pieces warped a bit, but that's okay. Right, so next step is to get a piece of plywood that's going to be this right size here. And then I'm going to glue all these bits to the piece of plywood and glue them down flat. And I'm going to get a large piece of MDF and just squish it on top. So I'm going to do that. Some bad news. Sort of fun, sort of not so fun. And a bit of a warning. Make sure that you get your squares square, as you can probably imagine. Here, let me zoom in a bit and I can show you what I'm talking about. If I take a light and I shine this up, you can see there's a clear gap there. So that is obviously larger than 90 degrees. It should be down, right? And so if I go from this point over, that is also not 90 degrees. These two sides are actually 90, which I cut earlier. So right angle, and then two obtuse angles to bring this one to acute. So just fair warning, make your squares square. There's really not much more to it than that. Yeah. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is check my tools, make sure everything's right, and then I'm going to recut all of the pieces that are necessary to recut, which really sucks, but I think it's definitely going to be necessary to have a good final product. So let's get to it. Okay, so I've gone back to the chop saw and I've gotten some things done, and here we can see, instead of cutting them all just as a batch and then putting it together to see if it all fits, I'm putting it together one by one, and you can see I've finished the first row of the first 8. Of course, there's 8 squares in a chessboard. I'm also having the grains face about the same direction. All of the light colors are going like this, and all of the dark colors are going like this. They're sort of all, you know, of course, twist and turn as they do, but they all look pretty much the same, and that's sort of nice. So next is to start the next row. So I'm sort of spoiling the surprise here of what it's looking like, but what I've done is I've put them all in the square, and I actually have 4 more piles of the other rows, and I've completed the checkered pieces. They're all square and they all are 2 inches. I'm gonna Now, glue these up after measuring their size, and I'm going to cut a piece of plywood on my table saw, and I will be gluing them to that piece of plywood. So here you go. You can see that the painter stick is only about half the width of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these painter sticks. I've screwed a flat 16 inches of painter sticks, so 12-inch painter sticks, so I had to use a little extra. And I've got the square clamped down, and I'm about to put this here. And then tomorrow, I'm gonna unscrew these, unscrew each of these painter sticks, and I will cut on my table saw this in the table saw, so that I'll be able to get just the square here. I know it's a bit wasteful to have this extra piece over here, but I'll probably end up using it somewhere in the future. It's just it's too loud to have it in my garage, and it's dark and raining outside, so I figured I'd just keep this one piece on and see how much I could salvage of it tomorrow.
Several days later.
Okay, so here we are, just about to, I've just taken it out of the glue up. It's been about 3 days now, and all the surface has glued together. And it's all well glued together, but unfortunately the, PEMDAS sort of thing, the order of operations was a bit off. And it's not very difficult to see. There's a bit of a swell here, so that this board comes out like this. If I wanted to do end grain, it'd probably consist of gluing multiple blocks together. Actually, here's a perfect example. Hello, so this is the Kieran from the future, arguably still the past to you, but that's okay. I just wanted to go over how I do this again, because I feel like the way that I manufactured it allowed for many sources of error, and I just wanted to quickly discuss how I would help mitigate those in the future if I ever decide to make another chessboard. Hopefully this one will last long enough that I don't need to do that though. So the first step would be to start with 8 rectangular prisms, of course of normal size, and glue them all together and plane them down. Now I've depicted 4.5-inch blocks here, simply due to the ease of entering any number I'd like into a CAD software, but this isn't the necessary amount that you need. You actually need much less than this. Of course you can calculate that on your own, but I figure it's probably better to give too much than too little. An important dimension that you need to look at before you glue them together is the height of them. Make sure they're 2 inches, or you can change that up, but we'll discuss that later. So once you've done that, you then cut along the long side of this board, and you've then created your final piece thickness and allowed for your tolerances, of course, so it can be sanded down and such, which is an important step. And once you do that, you just flip them together and glue them down, and there's your chessboard. Now, if we look back at the first picture here, you can see the top profile are 8 squares, right? And while that is a very traditional chessboard, don't get me wrong, an interesting implication of this design is that as long as the profile from the top is capable of being flipped around and mated to the same side, right? So this black piece has to mate up to this white piece here. If it's capable of doing that, and the average number, if you will, or that if the slope averages out to 2 inches, right? If you take the integral of that line there and then divide it by 16. If that equals 2 inches, then it'll remain square. That's a sort of an important factor. Here I've shortened the top by about 1/4 inch, and I lengthened the bottom by about 1/4 inch. And that is an interesting example, but it's not terribly intricate. Now you can see how this results in the chessboard itself. On the left here is the square, and then on the right you can see these sort of angled trapezoids, and they look very interesting, you know. It's sort of a strange, bit of a strange chessboard design, but it definitely looks interesting, and I think that it has some appeal. So if you're looking to make sort of a stranger chessboard, this might be the way to do it. Now, arguably, you could do this with well, you may not be able to do this with the traditional chessboard manufacturing process, but it would just require more work with the traditional chessboard manufacturing process. Another way that you could change this is with a router jig. You could have some sort of wave, like a sine wave or something like that, and then you could have a wavy side, and that would be certainly interesting. Obviously, I didn't do that, but that's just something I felt I wanted to discuss and propose on how I would do it next time. Anyways, we're going to go back to past Kieran, I suppose. I mean, honestly, does that really matter to you? Anyways, ciao. Okay, so here we are. The thingamajigger, the board, I've sanded it down quite a lot, and I have taken it to the handheld rip saw, or not the rip saw, the circular saw, handheld circular saw, and I cut down the sides by clamping a level on there like this at the correct distance away from the edge. You can see here is 1.5. Mine's about 1.5 inches from the edge, so I put it here, and then I cut all the way down the edge there to make a straight edge, or I mean, that's nearly straight. It's going to be straight enough for the table saw. And then I started actually over on this side, which gave me a flat edge, and then I went for a right angle over here. Now, word for the wise, maybe, don't drop things. Just make sure that you clamp down your freaking level, because at this point, you definitely don't want to mess up, and yeah, you can see it sort of went awry just on the one bit there because I didn't clamp it quite right. And so that was a really, really big bummer for that to happen right here. You can see on this corner. Obviously, it sort of ran into there. I'll show you with the straight edge. You can see what happened. You know, its blade was coming along, you know, and then it ran in there. So just make sure you do that correctly, and you don't totally screw that up like I did. But now, since I've got two sides that are square, I'm going to take it over to the table saw, and I'm going to square up each of the other sides, and then I'm going to cut it down so that all the checkered patterns are actually even, and each of these border squares are the same size, because this one sort of reduced the size a bit. So yeah, I'll show you when I'm done with that. Ciao. Okay, hello. So real quick, the last step here is adding a border around the edges of the chessboard. My camera's running out of battery, so I'll make this quick. Basically, I just took one more long piece of that hardwood that I was using, and I have, if you look at this profile, so this end is higher than this end. This is going to be the center of the chessboard here, and this is going to be the outside, so it's just sort of making it look a little more low profile rather than the inch high that it is. This edge is about 3/4 of an inch. Maybe that's not true, but whatever. And I'm gonna glue them all together on the chessboard, and then I'll take it upstairs, and it'll be ready for the final sanding and finish tomorrow morning. So that should be absolutely wonderful. So just a timeline update. It's actually the 25th of December today. Luckily, we're celebrating Christmas tomorrow when my relatives come over about 2 o'clock. So I'll be able to do some finished work before 2 o'clock. But I don't know if it'll be finished by then. But I'll show my dad the almost finished product then. I mean, everything will be put together. I just need to sand it and finish it. And so that'll look pretty good for a Christmas present. But anyways, here we go. I glued on these sides. It's honestly, it's a 2-footer. If you look back from here, it looks pretty good actually. But let me zoom in closer and we'll pan down and I'll show you. So, unfortunately, these cracks, there are some cracks along the wood where I believe the pine or the Douglas fir, shrunk. And you can see it happened largely on this side where I didn't quite get the glue gaps, and that was a bigger problem. But over here where I had some real tight joints, they actually cracked in the wood. And so the cracks in the wood look good. I find that the cracks over here sort of didn't look so good, and you can see that I've gotten some wood filler. Also, I sanded down these sides, and I used a Christmas gift, a belt sander, actually handheld belt sander, mind you, that it was to flatten down these pieces of wood here on the sides because they weren't quite flat when I put them on. So the bottom's basically done. The top, you may be able to see right, just basically on this corner right here, and there's one off to the side, like right here, and the one right below it. I just wanted to show you a quick tip about this, right? Because I felt like maybe I didn't have the right wood filler, or by chance I wouldn't have the right wood filler. And let me show you what I've done for that. I've taken some 60 grit sandpaper, and you can basically see what I've done. I took 2 pieces of wood, one of each color. See, you've got one I want to say spruce, I can't quite remember, and whatever this darker wood is. You can see that my wood recognition is suffering, but that's okay. And I basically just shredded them up, and I put it on this piece of plastic, which is glue resistant. You know, obviously the glue is going to peel up because it's so shiny. And once it dries, of course. And so I'm going to put some, I mixed it up into this ideal ratio, and let me just mix it up to get to this final color. I did just plain brown for the last batch, just to sort of see how that would work out. And I wasn't quite fond of the just brown. It was a little too dark. And so it's not a terribly homogeneous mixture because they're sort of larger chunks due to the larger how should I say, the larger grit sandpaper. This is a pretty useful sort of DIY wood filler because you take the 2 types of wood, and if you only use one, you know, this lighter color, then you're only gonna, if you only use the lighter color, you're gonna get a much lighter wood filler. And then if you only use a darker color, you'll get a much darker wood filler. Here you can see a darker wood filler. Over here is a much lighter color, which looks a lot more like this darker color here, and it helps blend the 2. And this mixture here is probably going to end up more like this than the other stuff. This is about 50-50 mixture up there. So we're in my room for a quick update. It's a bit cold in the garage, so it's nice and warm in here. As you can see, this chessboard is really coming along, and it looks almost like a chessboard. Now, today's the day that I finish sanding and apply the stain firstly, and then the two-part resin to the top here and maybe to the sides. I would prefer to go with a traditional finish, such as a wipe-on poly, because a thinner finish, I prefer a thinner finish. I feel like that's more sort of natural or fine woodworking, if you will. I know that that's a bit of a you know, buzzword, but whatever. Before I go any further, I need to make a YouTuber apology, the classic. I figure I'll get it out of the way now so I don't have to do it later. But I didn't video the thing with the chessboard staining it. But here is stained. The colors really pop, actually. You can see it's all shiny and nice. And, you know, all these cracks really give it some character, honestly. This looks really good. I'll get some close-up shots for you to see. Certainly got its character. So I'm gonna give this a little more time to dry and let the I mean, I've already wiped off all the stain I could, but I'm gonna let it, you know, soak up the stain, because of course it's angry, right? And then after that I'll be putting on the 2-part epoxy, and then this bad boy will be done. Should be pretty exciting. It's almost done here. It looks really nice. I'm happy with how these borders came out. They're almost gold. Yeah. Anyway, so pretty happy with this right now. I like the cracks. The next step is the 2-part epoxy, and maybe I'll film that. Okay, gloves on. Pro tip: freaking dry your hands before you put your gloves on. I'm gonna hook up 200 milliliters here. I hope not to use it all. Okay, so I introduced a lot of bubbles. That's maybe one part about a, how should I say, a dispenser system. I understand Total Boat does stuff with resin. I would like some Total Boat resin, but I don't have the money for that. I have seen it at my local marine store. It's expensive. It's nice, but expensive. So now that I've filled up the container, I'm going to cue up my song of choice, and I'm going to start my timer of 30 minutes. we've let the two-part resin dry, and we're down in the garage again after I've sanded down the drips on the bottom of the board that drip down off the sides. And I will show you them now, and we shall discuss. So the first thing I want to show you is this board. Now, let me just... You can see the fluorescent in the light bulb. Let's see. I mean, you can see my face in it. It came out really well. I did a second coat, and there is like a 2 or 3 touchable bubbles, and it's not necessarily flat, but honestly I think that's okay. It sort of makes it nice to touch, a more a more tactile experience. And yeah, and you can feel, I mean, there's a few bits that sort of have divots, but honestly it's really not a problem. And the sides are also smooth. Now, you can imagine that this dripped over, but let me show you this ridge here. So now that we're looking at the board, I've managed to sand down the edges here, and I re-stained them and put 2 coats of polyurethane on, which is semi-gloss. In order to get a crisp line between the semi-gloss and the full gloss on the sides and the top of the board, I needed to sand down these edges, which had many ridges on the bottom from potential drips in the 2-part resin. The way I managed to achieve this was by putting blue tape down along the inner square of this board, so I would miss this actual wood here, and put blue tape on top of the plywood with maybe a 1/2 inch overlap on this side. Now I put a few layers in and maybe 1 or 2 layers up, and that allowed me to hit the edges here where there was lots of 2-part resin and I wasn't sanding away the wood, and then avoid the areas where I was sanding away wood if I were to not have the tape there, and use the tape as a sacrificial layer of wood maybe. It ended up working out pretty well, and you can see these edges are quite crisp in terms of their finish. Another useful aspect of the 2-part resin dripping on the sides is areas like this, which were a bigger divot from my orbital sanding, turned into a flat area due to the 2-part resin actually filling in that area and the flat sanding of my orbital sander not coming over this edge. It allowed it to basically be a flat surface there while having the divot underneath, which worked out pretty well. So the next thing to do is put some feet on there and decide where they go. The obvious choice is to put it right here on this corner. I've got these cute clear bumpers, not sponsored. They seem quite robust. I'm going to put them on these corners, but I'm going to wait for this to dry. And I'll sign the bottom of this, and that'll be done. So here we are. The build is finished, I've played on this a few times, and I'm happy with the result. Though I'm not happy with quite how I communicated in this video. In my next video, where I talk about a dust collection system that I'm designing and developing and how you can make your own, I'll be more communicative for sure. Please like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on this next video. Thanks for watching. My name is Kieran Dolan. Bye.